Um, Hello everyone. My name is Pierre Olodo. I'm a member of the French Institute since 3 years now. So I've been doing quantification roughly since the same amount of time. I'm happy to be here, and my objective today is to share with you our CRQ journey, what we did good, what we did bad, where we stand today, and what we try to do for the future. So obviously, short disclaimer, but the figures you will see here are not the real ones. Those are fake figures, as well as the loss excellence curves that you will see. And oh boy, I'm really getting old. Sorry. Yeah. So, yeah, much better. Okay, I see now the screen. So, very shortly, so the agenda for today. So, as I said, I just have 2 or 3 slides just to set the scene with the context of my company, my group. Maybe you face the same issues in terms of complexity of the organization. I just wanted to share that with you. I will share details about our journey, give concrete example of use cases that we did, the challenges that we face, and how we try to overcome them. So that's it. So as Resha started to talk about it, I will give you some more details about the wonderful maisons of our group. I will call them maison, you can call them brand, I don't really mind. So we operate into 3 different areas. The first one is the jewelry, where you have maisons like Cartier and Van Cleef and Arpels that you may know about. We have what we call specialist watchmakers, like IWC, Jaeger-LeCoultre, Vacheron Constantin, very wonderful maisons. If some of you are watch enthusiasts, you will certainly know some of them. And the last area of business we have is called fashion and accessories. Here you will find some maisons doing leather goods, like Montblanc, for example, and also a very US-based maison, which is called Peter Millar. They are manufacturing clothes for golf players. So if you're playing golf, maybe you know Peter Millar, so it's part of the group. The second thing I wanted to share is, let's say, the complexity of our organizations when doing risk management, and especially cyber risks. You do have the maisons, so they are really in charge of the design of the product, their manufacturing, and the relationship with the customers is the heart of their business. You have central functions that you see here as well. So this is basically me, could be IT, could be legal, finance, stuff like that. And you have as well regional functions. And those are really, those guys know like everything which relates to the markets. Like if we have a maison which is willing to open a new boutique in a specific market, Japan, China, they would know how to do it, where to locate the store, and stuff like that. So as a cyber risk professional, I need to deal with all those different stakeholders, and it makes my work harder. But I think somehow cyber risk quantification is part of the answer in this case in this type of situation. So we have more than now 27 maisons. We have more than 2,000 boutiques that we operate on our own. 35,000 colleagues, and as well an idea of the turnover of the group. So our CRQ journeys. So I stated here full of opportunities and mistakes, and I will also talk about the mistakes because that's what matters for me when we share this kind of thing. When we are together, we must explain what we did wrong, right, as well. So back in before 2020, we had no CRQ at all. We were doing like EBIOS Risk Manager, for example. In Europe, back in the time, it was what was heavily used. It was great at some point, but it was, let's say, the old way of doing it. In 2020, we had a question coming from IT, so quite a technical topic to treat, which was, okay, let's say we want to move to the cloud all of our critical assets, like our crown jewels. How much risk do we have if we do it? So first use case. And then in 2021, we had a second use case, which was, as you can see, very much more business-oriented. It was the question of the acquisition of a new maison for the group. And then the question was, okay, if we buy this new maison, this new brand, when we will interconnect the two networks, how much risk do we have? Are we a threat to this new maison? Is this new maison a threat to the group? Okay, so new use case around quantification. And then I joined the group in 2022. And this year we had let's say, a lot of cases where we were asked to support the business in taking decisions, such as, for example, let's say there is a specific marketing team in a region, let's say North America, as we are here, which is willing to be able to better target the customers, right? But in order to do that, they need to take the customer data from the CRM, to put it into a data lake, to play a bit with it, to define better customer segments, better communications, and stuff like that. So what is the risk coming with that? How much risk do we have when we take this data out of the CRM, put it into a data lake, and give access control to different people, right? So this kind of use cases we had. And going forward, we had more and more use cases, so we define a risk quantification roadmap when we try to cover all of our maisons over a 2 years period. And we do present the results to the excos and the CEOs of the maison, which is quite new for us, but it shows that we achieved something where we are able to talk about cybersecurity with the leaders and the managers of the companies, which is great for us. And maybe somewhere in 20-something, everything will be automated and we will be able to go somewhere else, do something else, right? That's the dream picture here. So I said that we would talk about mistakes. So I just wanted to give you a perspective of my biggest mistake as a CRQ analyst when I started all of this. Let's say it's Saturday, it's a sunny day in Washington. You're going to your favorite ice cream shop with your children, friends, family. And then you arrive there and there is an electricity outage, right? The ice cream is melted. In this case, like the assumption you would take, right, is that there is a certain likelihood that the expected revenue for your favorite ice cream shop is that they will lose between 80% and 100% of their revenues over the same time frame, right? Because they cannot sell them, okay? And the point here is that we should never make assumptions on behalf of business stakeholders. That's the main point here, because what I just stated is true in this context, but if I have another assessment to do in another context, let's say an e-commerce website selling high-end products, that's very, very, very wrong, right? It's not because the website is not available that the maison would lose between 80% and 100% of revenue, right? In fact, when you discuss with the commercial guy, he will probably explain you that if we have a customer who wants to buy a very specific watch, right, probably there is 40% of our customers who will wait that the website is up again to buy it, okay? Maybe we'll have 30% who have a boutique nearby, and they will go in the boutique, buy the same stuff, so still no loss. And maybe we will have 20% more who will just call a customer relationship center, right, and buy it over a pay-by-link. And maybe in the end, we will lose between 0 and 10% of the expected revenue, right? So the point here is really never make assumptions on behalf of the business. They know better than us what's going on in terms of impact when it comes to quantification. And then I wanted as well to share with you the thing which is for me, the biggest success for the team. It was really in the way and the approach we had when presenting, let's say, the top risk scenarios, right? Before, we were doing it that way. Like, okay, we do scenario identification, we go to the stakeholders, we understand, we get to the metrics, and we have, okay, top 3. Customer data breach, point of sales outage, breach of intellectual property. For each of them, we have an ILE, which is called annualized loss exposures. For those of you who have done the classrooms yesterday and Sunday, it might sound familiar. And then the frequency, like could occur once every 5 years, 2 years, 4 years. Okay, perfect. And then in front of that, you put, okay, what could we do? Network segregation, MFA, stuff like that. That's great, right? But we are convinced that although this is great, then this is a better way to present it. It's a far better way. And I can guarantee you the first time I used this kind of reporting in front of the business, we finally achieved to start a discussion about cyber risk. The difference here is that we've taken into account the value chain. Like, if I'm in front of a CEO or a CFO of a watchmaking company, and I display this, then he knows that I understand that to make a watch and to sell it, we need to source the products, we need to do research and innovation to develop new calibers, we need to manufacture it properly, we need to do marketing and communication, and we need to sell them, right? And for each piece of the value chain, we had like the asset, which is supporting the process, the part of the value chain. And for each asset, we have one scenario, right? And if you present it this way, then you can start to have a conversation because you present the biggest picture. Like over the whole value chain, okay, what's going wrong? Now, we might have an issue about our CRM platform and our event management platform. Okay, great. How? Because we are storing our customer data into, let's say, Salesforce, and we identify the kind of access control issue. And then you can go down, go deeper in the layers and start this discussion, right? And it makes a real difference because they perceive you as someone who understands what they do, right? And this makes, from my perspective, a big difference. And this is my end game. We're not there yet, but in the end, what I would like to do is to present how much risk is associated with the life cycle of a product, to be at the product level. Because if you do it that way, you might even be able to be embedded into the design of new products, which is even better, right? But we're not there yet. So as of today, we have quantified a certain number of scenarios. We have 3 people doing quantification, developing the roadmap within the group. And we have mapped more than 80 assets over the whole value chain that you've seen before, so from sourcing to sales. And then when we were here, we were like, okay, we have covered 15 maisons. When we do everything, then it will be quite finished. We'll just let it go, update it once a year. And we were wrong. In fact, what happened is that we had new stakeholders knocking at the door and asking new questions. And I will just detail one of them, which is a CFO during a restitution who asked me, okay, guys, that's cool what you showed us like here. I do understand that. Can I embed the annualized loss exposures that I see here into my provisions for the next fiscal year? Well, tough question. I don't know. Maybe we should discuss about that, right? We also had other questions that, okay, can we apply FAIR to physical security? I don't know. Okay, let's try. And then you have new questions, which are there, on top of what you are already doing. And the point is you cannot, but of course you have the same budget to run everything, right? So you have to find new solutions to be more efficient. And my goal today was to share with you what we are trying to do to overcome that, to find new solutions to deliver at the speed of the business, which is the topic of this conference. So we know that we have multiple data that we have aggregated from a lot of places. Like we know where our assets are, we know the threats, the event frequency, the recovery time, the control environment, a lot of things, right? And the point is to leverage everything to create what we have called a CRQ factory. So we are doing this in 4 steps. The first step is to identify commonalities. You might have in your company 2 different teams or entities using the same platform for the same purpose. Let's say SAP for finance. That's one functional commonality, right? And then there are the technical commonalities. You might have 2 different applications using the same methodology for authentication, right? That's one technical commonality. Or the hosting, or the type of data, right? So everything you have, you just need to have a look at it and identify what is in common. And the whole point of doing this is to define scenario buckets that you will prepare, and the next time you see an asset that you can put in one of those buckets, then you do it and you're ready to run the scenario, right? So one example could be the number 1, and we'll take it in the slide after and have a look at it. So a third-party app hosted externally and processing customer PII. So that would be the asset, right? The threat would be external, the impact would be a data leakage, and the vector would be a phishing email, right? So that's a scenario bucket. And I can have 10, 20, 30, 50 assets going into this bucket. And now the game is to be able to industrialize how you would collect your metrics, right? If we say that we are taking this scenario here, and the vector is a phishing, then when you look back at different ontology, for the threat event frequency, like how many times you have the threat touching your infrastructure, basically, then maybe your CSIRT have somewhere, thanks to your email gateway, let's say, the number of phishing emails landing into your mailboxes. So this is one metric. And maybe if you are running phishing campaigns, you have as well your click rate, right? So you would know that if you receive 1,000 emails per year, like phishing email attempts, and you have a click rate of 10%, then maybe your most likely is somewhere around 100, right? So 100, let's take this assumption. Now, so the mail is received, it is clicked, right? So somewhere on your machine you might have a command and control. You don't know exactly, but the guy in question has to move from your workstation to the asset in question, right? So which controls do you have? You might have MFA to access to the application, network seg, back, a lot of things, right? But this would be your GRC team. They would know better than you which controls you have, right? And then you would define your vulnerability. And then when you look at the other part of the ontology, for the loss magnitude, for the response cost, you can call your CSIRT and say, hey, if I have this kind of incident happening, can we define tiers? Like if it's, let's say, a small incident, then that would cost us 20 man days. Okay, if it's a medium one, could be 40 man days. So you can define different tiers, right? But you would have this figure prepared. And then for the second part, let's say fines and judgment, maybe the legal team has the figures, right? How much would cost a fine, a GDPR fine, for example. And the whole point here is to prepare your buckets and to know in advance the metrics you have to ask, right? And then to run the scenario more efficiently, more quickly. And finally, the last step to do is, of course, to test that it is working. And for that, you can do something which is very simple. You take your manual assessment, you take your assessment with your scenario bucket, and you check if you don't have a difference of more than 5%, 10% will still be okay. If it works, then you can assume that your bucket is ready to use, right? And finally, like, the whole point of doing that from my perspective is this. Like, let's say you have 10 scenarios that you have to run one by one, okay? So for the 10 scenarios, you would have to take into account the context, to find the right subject matter expert, to define the model, to get the metrics, to run it, to calibrate, etc., etc. Like all the things that you've seen before, yesterday and Sunday, right? If you have prepared scenario bucket, you will maybe identify that you have 10 scenarios, but you can treat them with only 3 buckets, which are ready to use, right? And it makes a big difference. And from my perspective, there are 5 trends if you do it for you, for your team, and for your organization. The first one, of course, is that you will deliver faster. That's a fact, right? You see the asset, you know in which bucket it can be put, you get the metrics, you run the scenario, done. The second thing is very important to me. It will reduce the likelihood of divergence for similar scenarios. Let's say you have a team of people with different backgrounds, maybe using different tools to do quantification. The point is, if you define a bucket, you define ground rules, and you reduce this risk of having results that might be different because of the fact that the scenario is run by 2 different people, right? Because you have defined your boundaries, and you know where you go. The third one, I like this one very much, is that it creates expertise within CRQ team. I did it this year. There is one person in my team in charge of the buckets related to e-commerce, right? And before treating this kind of scenarios, this person didn't know exactly how an e-commerce website would work, etc., etc. Today, you can ask her anything you want. She knows perfectly how it works. She knows that there is a front end when you can create your basket, put your products in it, and run pay. And then she knows that below this front end, you have an order management system managing the delivery to your home, the relationship with SAP, everything, right? And then the back end and everything. It brings your CRQ team a kind of business expertise, which is very important because once again, the thing is to make sure that the business understands that you get what they're doing. The fourth one is, of course, the budget, because as all of you, I guess, we need to keep the budgets as flat as possible from one financial year to another. So the time you are gaining to not running into each of those scenarios, you can do other things, right? And finally, the last one is the business ownership, because every time I create a new scenario bucket, I have someone in my team in charge of it, but I have someone on the business side as well, responsible for it, to make sure the metrics are accurate and validated prior reporting anything. Yeah, and finally, I just wanted to finish with that, like the trust of the business stakeholders is the key to keep quantifying, because if I'm like being honest with you, my biggest fear is to present something to an exco, for example, and to have, let's say, to lose their trust because I would not have sufficiently checked my numbers and make sure that they are vetted by the subject matter experts. And it's my biggest fear. Yeah, and that was all for me. If you want to connect, you have the QR code, and happy to take any question if there is.
We do have one that came in for the iPad. It says, from Philip, you mentioned the ice cream e-commerce example. Do you factor in reputational loss in calculations, and if, how do you handle that?
Sorry, can you, I didn't hear you.
Couldn't hear me?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. So you mentioned the ice cream e-commerce example. Do you factor in reputational, reputational loss. Very interesting topic. it's very difficult to establish that. I can give you one example where we succeeded to do it. We were discussing with a maison for which the reputation is very important, right? And the question was around customer data leak. What would be the impact on the expected revenues if there is a data leak and somehow it's tied to our reputation, right? And what we found is that in the end, the answer lies with the business. Like, the model we used is the following. This maison had customer segmentation with different tiers, right? On the top of the tiers, you had the customers who love the brand. They would always buy from the brand, even if there is a data leak, right? And then the more you go down, and then the less the customers are prone to be like really, or let's say, the more they are subject to buy less from the brand if there is a data leak, right? So we worked with the business, and the assumption that we've taken is that, for instance, we took the two last tiers of this customer segmentation. We had a look at the revenues generated by those two last tiers over 1 year. And the assumption we've taken with them is that for the last tier, like prospect, people who would be buying their first watch, the revenues for this last year would be impacted between 0 and 20%, right? And for the upper tier, it would be between 0 and 10%. And for the other tiers, no effect. But it was a way for us to translate a data breach to reputational risk impacting the revenue of the maison. But it's very difficult because you have to go very deep into the model, and you have to find the right person having the answer.
The question came from me, so I will have an additional question to that one.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, it's very hard to do. But how do you classify the customers in the first place? Because how do you know that one customer will buy no matter what the other customer does?
So the thing is that I'm not defining it. The marketing team is doing it. All the metrics and the figures on the loss magnitude side, which is here, they never come from me, never. And in fact, I don't want that they come from me. Because when I will be reporting this to the board, if there is the CMO, which is here, who is here, and he's challenging me, my answer will be, okay, but those figures, they come from your team. And it's the team which is the closest to the customers. It's basically their job, and they have defined those percentages. So it's okay. And even on this side, on the left side, it doesn't come from me as well. I do risk management. I don't do CTI. I don't do CCERT. I don't do SOC.
I have another question. Sorry.
Yeah.
But how do you nail them down that they actually give you an answer and they stand by it?
How? Sorry, I didn't
How do
get.
you nail that down, that like the marketing team stands by their answer? Because we often see that we cannot give you an answer to that.
So yeah, it depends. I mean, it's true to say that there is not an answer for every question, right? If you have a look at the body of knowledge of the FAIR Institute, there is something called calibration, which is something you can do in partnership with the business, and where your role is to make them give an answer which is accurate, like, right, the 90% thing, you remember that? That's the goal, right? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, I prefer not to take it into account and note it down in the report. This has not been taken into account, rather than taking broad assumptions which I could not explain, to be fully honest. Yeah.
What challenges did you encounter in selling risk quantification? Before that question, were they using heat maps, colors like high, medium, and low?
Yes.
So how challenging was it, or was it not challenging, or was it a quick win for you? Because for my company, was not a quick win. What was your approach to getting them to buy into risk quantification?
So it's very difficult. First, I have to say it's very difficult. I mean, the first thing that you need to do from my perspective, but every context is different, is to do a bit of stakeholder management prior entering into this and identify who will be with you in this journey, who will be against you, because some people will be against you, and who will be neutral, like, okay, do whatever you want, I don't really care. It happens, right? And the goal here is, and for example, for the green, amber, red thing, if you have a look at this slide, you can see that. No, not that one. Yeah. You have red, amber, and green. And what happened is that we presented this slide in a first row without the colors. People were like, oh, where are we? Where are our colors? We are lost, you know? And I realized that it was the beginning of the conversation about the risk appetite, right? Because we had all the scenarios for the whole value chain. We had the kind of minimum amount, the maximum, the revenue of the company, and then it was like, okay, so now we can set where is the boundary between green and orange, and where is the boundary between orange and red. And then we reinstated red, amber, green into this schema.
So what you're saying then is that you can quantify risk and also map back to the colors.
Yes, if they feel the need to have it, then you can give it to them. And on top, you can tell them, look, on top of that, and by the way, we can define what would be our risk appetite. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
You said the goal is to break the CRQ down from the value chain down to the product level.
The product is my dream.
Right.
It's not, yeah.
No, it's not the goal. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, what's the biggest blocker to getting down to the product level?
In my context, it's manufacturing. Because manufacturing is very complex. You have a lot of operating technology here. You might have in the same manufacturer very old machines, new machines that you would calibrate differently, right? And then in one manufacturer, you can do 15 products. To do those 15 calibers, let's say, you would need maybe 2 machines for one, 3 machines for another one, 10 machines for the third one. That's very complex. But, I mean, honestly, it would be really something, if we could achieve this, then the use case I had in mind was mostly when we want to develop a new product. Let's say, I don't know, a connected watch, you know, with a SaaS platform. And if we, like the cybersecurity guys, are embedded at the beginning of this process, we can do cost-benefit analysis on, okay, if we want to implement this piece of hardware in the connected watch, then if we make the choice of this piece or that piece or this SaaS platform too, then what's the difference? And that would be something awesome, right? But obviously today it's not something we can do.
Pierre, can you go to the slide where you showed the loss exclusions curve?
Oh yeah, sure.
Question on that.
Where is that? Yeah, on the testing the scenarios. Yes.
Is the orange curve on top, is that the risk appetite?
No, sorry.
Tolerance, or-
I didn't explain that. I just show this because it's the classical way we use to report about specific scenarios. Is that here you have like what we call the baseline scenario, and then in red it's when you are asked to do what they call a cost-benefit analysis, and then you have those 2 curves that answers the question. Okay, if I implement this control, what would be the difference on my risk profile? Then those are the 2 lines you see here. Yeah.
I don't want to get too deep into this, but how did you set risk appetite or risk tolerance to compare the topmost curve to your tolerance to determine essentially if the risk for that particular entity, maison, if you will,
Yeah.
exceeds the appetite, and perhaps you need to do something else. You need to mitigate, or you just
Yeah.
exit the activity. How did
I think it's really up to them. And here, I'm just the guy who explains what we have in terms of exposure. That's just my job, basically. And then they have a look. They see, let's say, the less risky scenario, the most risky one. They have their revenues. They have other metrics in mind, and they set the limits by themselves. But it's really not my job, basically, to do that. I can help them to put a framework on top of it, like, okay, if you are above this limit, then you should mitigate. If you are between there and there, then you should think about an action plan. If you are below, then it's okay. I can explain basic risk management stuff, but yeah. Okay, so if there is no other questions, I thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you.